The last halakha that we had was the halakha of not wearing tzitzit inside of a cemetery. We spoke a little bit more about this on Shabbat. We mentioned that there are some who wanted to tie their tzitziot together in a knot and therefore invalidate the tzitzit so they could wear it in the cemetery. Says Maran, "V'lo ho'ilu klum b'takanatan." They did not fix anything with their takana because either they now made the strings pasul, and now they're wearing a four-cornered garment that doesn't have strings, and they're violating a biblical prohibition, or those strings count, and they're now wearing strings inside of a cemetery. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it that you pasul the strings and also wear the tzitzit. This is the problem. Very often in Judaism, you'll find, in rabbinic literature, you'll find that the rabbis use these terms. They'll find Jews who try to make all kinds of nice inventions, and the rabbis will say, it's nice that they tried. It was, you get points for trying, but you didn't help. You didn't accomplish anything with this invention.
Why complicate things if you can just tuck them in your pants? I assume you're talking about talit katan?
They must be talking about a talit where they're wearing over their clothing, or some kind of garment that is a tzitzit, or some reason that they'd have to have tzitziot that they couldn't tuck in. Or it's easier to just make some kind of double knot and go into the
But
cemetery.
you already said that if they don't touch the ground.
That was about tzitziot, which are your clothing. The tzitziot, which are
So
extra.
if you wear a talit into a graveyard.
Or the tzitzit that you wear under your shirt that are not part of your clothing.
So...
The halakha of not dragging on the tombs,
Yeah.
that halakha is referring to the days where they wore like ponchos, where their clothing had four corners that had tzitziot. The fact that we wear extra tzitzit just to do a mitzvah with is no longer part of our clothing.
I don't remember, because it's been a few years since I went to the kever in Kew Gardens, but do people go in with talit and tefillin?
We spoke a little bit of that grave last week.
I don't remember. I don't remember
I'm
seeing
assuming
anyone.
that people know the halakha to tuck in their tzitziot. I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember. I've been there a few times. I don't know.
I don't remember people
I did.
davening at
Where are you talking about, though?
at the kever of the Rebbe.
The Ohel?
Yeah,
Because
we
a lot
spoke
of
about it
people
little
go
bit
there.
last week. You
Because
can
last week was packed.
you can ask somebody who's been there recently. I don't remember. I for sure put my tzitziot when I was there. The next halakha is interesting. It's halakha Gimel. We read it already together, but we'll do it again. Hanichnas toch arba amot. Somebody who enters 4 amot. אתה רוצה רק בשולחן ערוך זה Chaf Gimel, Gimel. Somebody who enters 4 amot shel met of a deceased person or shel kever, or of a tomb, a grave. Where would a person come into contact 4 amot of a body?
Where?
Where? What kind of scenario?
The
At the funeral.
cemetery.
Yeah.
If they're part of the Chevra Kadisha. If a person is in a hospital and there's a deceased person there. There's a number of times where a person can come into contact with actually the dead body, not just the grave. Dino k'nichnas lebet hakvarot. It's as if he is inside of a cemetery. So, even one grave or one body, the 4 amot around it, that is considered the amount of space that constitutes a cemetery, which a person can't walk into tziyot. I don't know why this halakha is labeled as dalid, because in the Shulchan Aruch that I have, it doesn't have a dalid, but here it's a dalid. במקום שנוהגים להסיר ציצית מטלית המת בבית, in the places where they have a custom to remove the tzitziot from the burial shrouds that are covering the person's body, אם הכתפיים, הכתפים לובשים ציצית, if the coffin bearers are wearing tzitzit, that could constitute a problem of lo'eg larash, meaning in a place where they don't allow the dead body to wear tzitzit. There are places where they actually bury a person at talit, and they don't cut the corners off. In many places have a custom to cut the corners off. In the place where the custom is to cut the corner off, therefore invalidating the tzitzit, the people who are holding the coffin also should not be wearing tzitzit when they are carrying that
Well,
coffin.
they're not supposed to wear it anyways because you're next to, within 4 amot of the body.
Yeah.
Correct,
You're
but
talking about
maybe
wearing
we're saying
visible, visible
no,
or at all?
At all.
Oh, you mean
At all?
underneath as well?
Yes, that's what it seems to be saying, Malak.
That's a lot.
But it's part of your clothing and you just tuck it
It's
in.
not part of the clothing, it's underneath our clothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wearing some person is wearing an extra garment that is a mitzvah around the person who's not wearing that garment anymore for a mitzvah.
So it's different if you're in a cemetery.
It seems that it's a different halakha from being in a cemetery than from actually carrying the body. Those are two different halakhot. It's more intense, the people who are carrying the body.
So they should do what?
If they cut off, I don't know what they do here. If they cut off the tzitziot, then they should take off their tzitziot also. At least according to superficial reading of the Shulchan Aruch. We'll read on our own.
So then, it's really saying that, is it more just what is appropriate, kind of like derech eretz, or is it more
It's a
that,
halakha.
or is it that the mate has consciousness of what's going on around
Yes.
it?
Yes. Yes.
So it's in a sense making the mate aware that it's dead.
To the contrary, it's not making the mate feel bad that it's dead.
Well, by not doing it, you're not making it feel bad that it's dead.
By not wearing tzitziot,
Mm-hmm.
we're not mocking the mate that he cannot wear tzitziot anymore. The worry is that we will be wearing tzitziot in a place where the mate cannot. Yeah? Alright, let's see the bottom here. Halakha Dalet on page 412, in the middle of the page. Isur knisa lebet hakvarot, the prohibition of entering a cemetery kshat-talit alav, when wearing a talit, haynu afilu michutz le'arba amot min hakvarim, is even outside of 4 amot from the tombs, the graves. Kol shehu betoch bet hakvarot b'makom sheyesh kvarim mesaviv, so long as he's inside of the cemetery and there are graves all around. Imagine that one is in the middle of the cemetery. There's some kind of park, and the person is in that park, and all around there are graves. This is still part of the cemetery. So even though he's not within 4 amot from a grave, it's still considered being inside of the cemetery. Aval, but im hu biktzeh bet hakvarot, if he's on the corner of the cemetery, b'makom she'en sham kvarim, where there are no graves, meaning along the fence. Very often you'll find there's roads, trails, there's no graves there. אלא רק הוא מקום שהוקצה לצורך גבורה. It's only a place that has been portioned off that eventually they will bury people there. But right now there are no graves there. יש להקל, one could be lenient. כל שאינו נמצא בתוך 4 אמות סמוך לקברים, so long as he's not actually within 4 amot from the grave. וטוב להחמיר אפילו מחוץ ל4 אמות מן הקברים, and it's good to be strict even when you're in a place that's farther than 4 amot from the graves. כל שנמצא לפנים מן הגדר סביב בית הקברות, so long as you're within the gate, you're within the fence of the cemetery, it's good already to be strict over there. You'll have an interesting problem. Whereas in Israel, you don't really drive into a cemetery. You drive up to a cemetery and then walk into the cemetery. In America, people drive into the cemetery. So I don't know if one wanted to be strict, if they should tuck in their tzitziot before they drive into the cemetery. And what I do is just when I get out of the car, that's when I tuck in my tzitziot, or while I'm getting out of the car, while I'm still outside of the actual burial section. And in Israel, it's easier to be more careful about this because you don't drive into a cemetery. Not that I'm familiar with it.
So
Anyway.
you should do it, you should take off your seat just before you go in.
Or tuck them in.
What happens if you do it at home before?
Also,
you
that's
go?
okay. That's okay. The person knows they're going to go to the cemetery, so they're tucking in their tzitziot. I want to go through the footnote at the bottom because it's an intelligent footnote. Ayen b'Pri Megadim. Look in the Pri Megadim. There's a book called Pri Megadim. Could somebody get me his name quickly on their phone?
What is that?
It's a book.
Pre
Pri Megadim. Megadim. M-E-G-A-D-I-M.
Megadim. It's a restaurant. Joseph ben Meir Teomim.
Yosef ben Meir Teomim.
So where's the restaurant?
Who lived in? Who lived in?
Lemberg, Galicia,
How long ago?
18th century.
Okay. So he's an Ashkenazi
an
Achron,
old
quoted
restaurant.
very, very often in Shulchan Aruch. Pri Megadim is a commentary that summarizes a lot and adds in some novel insights into things, explaining different opinions. The Pri Megadim katav sheyesh shalosh shitot b'davar. I'm in the right column at the bottom, the second line. There are 3 shitot, 3 approaches to this situation of wearing tzitziot inside of cemeteries. Hashita echad, the first approach. Hi shitat habach. This is the shita, this is the opinion of Rabbeinu, the Bet Chadash, Rabbi Yoel Circus. She'en isur mikar hadin ela betoch 4 amot shel hakvarim. That halachically there's no prohibition to wear tzitziot unless you're actually within 4 amot from a grave. אבל מחוץ ל4 אמות של הקברים, מותר אפילו בתוך מחיצות בית הקברות. Even if you're inside of the walls of the cemetery, but you're not within 4 amot of a tomb, a grave, you can wear your tzitziot out. There's no problem. So what's his opinion? Rabbi Yoel Circus, the Bach, first opinion. You can wear your tzitziot until you actually come within 4 amot of a grave. Vashita Shniya, the second opinion, Hi shitat Taz. Taz is a book called the Turei Zahav. The Turei Zahav was the elder of the Ashkenazi rabbis who wrote a commentary on Shulchan Aruch in his generation. Brilliant commentary, and every smicha yeshiva in the world we study his commentary first. Towards the end of his life, there was a younger Ashkenazi rabbi. Younger, I don't mean like 15. Younger, just younger than him, not a senior Ashkenazi rabbi, who wrote a book called the Shach, the Siftei Kohen, the lips of the Kohen. The Shach gained a lot of popularity on the Ashkenazi Jewish street. It's a very clear work. It's hard, it's difficult, but very clear and very scholarly. In the smicha circles, we almost always rule like the Shach over the Taz. Even though the Taz was the elder, once the Shach made an appearance, his works were just that much more approachable and clear. The Shach writes that he edited each word that he wrote 101 times. He says, my words, there's not one extra word, and not one word that is missing. And therefore, the rabbis, unlike what we do with any other rabbi, his words mean something. When he uses a word, for example, it always means the same thing every single place that he writes it. When he writes another word, it means the same. The Shach is extremely consistent. Halperes once told us a story that the reason why the Shach is so much more accepted in the Ashkenazi world than the Taz, even though the Taz held the senior status, was because of the Taz's inability to accept the fact that the Shach was an up-and-coming star in the Jewish community. He had a hard time respecting him. He was younger, he was a real scholar, and God forbid the Taz was a bad person. The Taz just, it's like a normal human nature. And because of this, the many rabbis write that Hashem worked it out this way that the more humble of the two received the honor of being studied the most. The Shach, really, if you go to a real smicha circle and you ask people the Shach, they must know it almost by heart. The Shach is a very well-studied commentary Shulchan Aruch. The Taz is also on the same page as the Shulchan Aruch. The Taz writes, "Sheyesh lahachmir mishum siyag afilu michutz 4 amot." That one should put in their tzitziot even outside of 4 amot. Kol shehu betoch beit hakvarot, so long as you're within the cemetery. But the reason for this is a fence. What's the fence?
You might walk closer.
Maybe you'll walk close to a grave and you'll forget to have put in your tzitziot, and therefore his suggestion is you don't have to put in your tzitziot. He agrees with the Bach. Are you obligated to put in your tzitziot when you come to the cemetery? No.
No.
But why does he tell you to do it?
Because he's afraid you'll walk too close.
Very good. It's a fence. He doesn't want you to walk too close to the tzitziot out. Vashita shlishit, the third shita, he shitat Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham is perhaps the most studied commentary on the Shulchan Aruch in the Ashkenazi circles, aside from the Mishnah Berurah. He's older than the Mishnah Berurah, and perhaps before the Mishnah Berurah came about, this was the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Quoted everywhere. You'll see Magen Avraham everywhere. The Magen Avraham writes, "Shebetoch mechitzat bet hakvarot," that within the walls of the cemetery, asur afilu chutz 4 amot min hakvarim. He holds, according to the basic halacha, once you enter the cemetery, according to halacha, it doesn't make a difference how close you are to a grave. You're in a cemetery, the tzitziot must be inside. As a halacha, not as a fence. So first opinion says only within the graves. Inside of the fence is okay. And the second halacha says it's okay also inside of the cemetery, as long as you're not next to a grave. But as an extra caution, always put in the strings. The third opinion says
You must.
you must. It doesn't make a difference. Once a person enters the cemetery, they must. It's a long day today, everybody? Yeah.
It's the weather, too.
That's okay. That's fine.
It's the weather.
Oh, Hashem. Now, steps in the Pri Megadim. והסביר הפרי מגדים שלדעת המגן אברהם, that according to the Magen Avraham, according to the third opinion, חוץ לבית הקברות אסור כל שהוא בתוך 4 אמות לבית הקברות. The halachic difference between the second opinion and the third opinion is going to be as follows. If you're standing right outside of the cemetery, out of the fence, within 4 amot of the cemetery, but there are no graves, according to the second opinion, do you have to put your tzitzit in?
Outside.
No.
You're saying like an unconsecrated cemetery that hasn't like
No, it's a
brand
real
new
cemetery, but I'm standing right outside of
one?
the
So
gate.
there's no graves.
I'm within
Yeah.
4 amot, but not within 4 amot to a grave, within 4 amot to the cemetery.
Oh, so
Do I
see.
have to put him in tzitzit?
So the border is there, but not a grave.
No, because that's already an extra. He only holds you putting your tzitzit in the cemetery because maybe you'll come next to a grave. But he won't tell you to put in your tzitzit because maybe you'll come into a cemetery. Maybe you'll come into a grave. According to the third opinion, though, who holds that actually halachically you must put in your tzitzit when you enter the cemetery. If you're within 4 amot to the cemetery, must you put in your tzitzit?
Probably.
Yes. This is the difference between those two opinions. The question in Aramaic we always ask, Lemai nafka mina. What is the difference? Who cares if you hold it's a custom or it's a halakha? This is the difference. The difference is what happens if you're walking on a sidewalk next to a cemetery. According to the Magen Avraham, you'd have to tuck in tzitzit. According to the second opinion, you don't have to. And according to the first opinion, it's not even a question. According to the first opinion, of course you don't have to.
I wonder if they would hold differently than on the question of a Kohen walking outside the cemetery where
Interesting.
there's no graves there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Though over there, the logic for why we don't do it is
It's a little
different.
different, yeah.
Because of Tumah and Tara, whereas here it's not Tumah. It's interesting. אולם בת, המחצית השקל פירש דברי המגן אברהם, שסובר גם כן כהתז, שאין לאסור אלא ממקום התחלת בית הקברות, אבל מחוץ לבית הקברות שרי, אפילו בתוך אמה אחת, ואפילו לקה מחיצה מפסקת בין הקברים למקום שעומד. The Machatzit Shekel steps in and says, I'm sorry, Rabbi Pri Megadim, I don't agree with your analysis of the third opinion. I hold the third opinion agrees with the second opinion. Even though their logic is different, the third opinion would say that you're allowed to wear your tzitzit out so long as you're outside of the cemetery, even if you're just 1 amma away from a cemetery, even if there's no fence that separates between you and the graves, so long as you're not in the cemetery, you're okay. אבל בתוך בית הקברות, but inside of the cemetery, דהיינו בתוך המחיצה שמסביב לבית הקברות, ובמקום שהוקצה לצורך קבורה, אפילו אין סביב המחיצה, אסור אפילו רחוק 4 אמות מן הקברים. And he says, but once you enter, according to both the last two opinions, you have to tuck in your tzitzit once you're inside of the cemetery. This is all brought down in the Biur Halacha. We're in the bottom of page 413 on the left-hand side. The Katav Mishnah Bura, and the Mishnah Bura comes to try to conclude which of these 3 opinions we should follow. L'halacha, he says, according to the halacha, be'emtza bet hakvarot, in the middle of the cemetery, b'makom sheyesh kvarim mesaviv, where there are graves around, yesh lachmir afilu rachok 4 amot min hakever. We should be strict even if we're farther away than 4 amot from the grave, like the second opinion, because maybe we'll come to be near a grave. אבל בסוף בית הקברות, but in the perimeter of the cemetery, במקום שאין שם קברים, אלא רק הוקצה לצורך קברים, we're far enough away from graves, we're on the edge of the cemetery, we're not in the middle of the cemetery, even if this is a place where they will eventually bury people, אין להחמיר מדינה ברחוק 4 אמות מן הקבר, we don't have to follow the third opinion, we don't have to put on our tzitzit, so long as we're not actually within 4 amot. So according to this opinion, one can drive, let's say, to the cemetery here, into the cemetery, park their car, and so long as they haven't entered the plot area where they actually bury people, they can tuck in their tzitzit over there. Actually,
So the
not really, because that's still in the middle of the cemetery.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's what I was
it's an
gonna
interesting
say.
question.
Yeah.
Imagine if one was coming from the other direction, because the Jewish cemetery right now is on the edge of this. So if there was a way, I don't know if there's a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To
there
come,
is a one.
there's a way to come from that side.
For the
Kohanim?
workers.
Oh,
No,
workers.
workers.
Okay, so if you're familiar,
If you continue, you see their shed
Oh.
where they put their equipment.
okay,
Sounds
so
like you have insider knowledge.
No, I
unfortunately,
saw it.
been there one too many times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
unfortunately.
so
If you
over.
notice, there is the main entrance. If you keep driving a little bit on Carroll Canyon Road, there is
Yeah.
another entrance.
Right.
By the way, they're trying to build a whole new neighborhood at this canyon over there.
Great neighbors, they won't make any
Really?
noise. So this
No malpartners.
this
Definitely.
this
Definitely.
Shake, rattle, and roll.
So, in that area, that would be okay not to tuck in the tzitzit so long as they haven't entered the burial area. V'afal piken, even though, says Rabbi David Yosef, whose mother-in-law, by the way, passed away today, the rabbi who wrote this book, his mother-in-law, so his wife is Siddiq Shiva now. V'afal piken nachon shelo yikanes kolshu lifnim mechilat bet hakavod. It's better not to enter at all inside of the walls of the cemetery. Maybe we'll enter one of the area near one of the graves, and we don't intentionally mean to, we don't want to, but it happens that way. Look in the book of Look at the other books that seem to have reached similar conclusions. What he says is this reason of the Mishnah Berurah is telling us halachically, you don't have to put in your tzitzit just because you entered the cemetery. So long as you're not in the middle, but you're on the outskirts of the cemetery, it's okay. How much more so when you're outside of the cemetery and just within 4 amot of the cemetery, it's not a problem. But it's best if a person just gets himself used to putting in their tzitzit when they go into the cemetery. That way they don't, by accident, come near a grave they don't know about. I'll tell you this could be a problem in many places because sometimes the person goes, San Diego's not this story, but remember in Warsaw when I went to the cemetery, Krakow, when I was in the cemeteries over there. You have graves, they were destroyed by the Nazis, destroyed by anti-Semites who stole rocks to build their houses. Just, for example, if you go today to Har Zaitim, to the Mount of Olives, there's vandalism there every day to Jewish graves. The Israeli police already have given up trying to stop it. There's a hotel on top of the Mount of Olives. I remember its name. It's the Intercontinental, this one. It has a beautiful view of Yerushalayim. That hotel was built by the Jordanians. In the 19th years, they had Jerusalem. And they decided they were too lazy to bring stones. And so they just took apart Jewish graves. And the hotel is built out of Jewish tombstones. And it was easy. Big slabs of stone. They're free. They took them. And there are many, many, many graves that... I don't know what the person sleeping in the room is like, rest in peace on their wall. I don't know exactly how that feeling works out. But the Jordanians, the HaShamayim, don't think they were good people just because they have some kind of peace agreement with them. It's still, to this day, this hotel is built out of Jewish graves. And that means there are, hundreds, I don't have to tell you a number of Jewish graves on Har HaZeitim that you don't know where they are because any marker over them has been destroyed. And so in general, it's a good practice. Once we enter into the cemetery, just to put our tzitzit, we don't know when we're actually near a dead body or when we're not. The same was true in Europe. When I was in Europe, entire graves, there are parts of the cemetery, it was once, but now someone destroyed and they played soccer there, whatever they were doing over there. It's a pretty tragic situation. You should know, Rabbi Yonatan Halevy was very close with Hosni Mubarak.
Very close?
Very close.
Oh yeah, you told a story.
How did they get close? When Chacham Ovadia was the chief rabbi of Egypt in the early years of the state of Israel, the general at the time was Hosni Mubarak. It was a military state, if I'm not mistaken. And he had a lot of power, Mubarak. And there came a time where there were certain things that happened in the Jewish community. Mubarak stepped in to help Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and protected him. And until the end of his life, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef kept up a very close connection with him. He wasn't under any illusions of who he was, but they would write birthday cards to each other. They were sometimes when Israel needed things to be done in Egypt and they couldn't go through legal channels because there was no working relationship, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef stepped in to take care of such matters. There's a famous story that Rabbi Ovadia told, it's on YouTube if you want to listen to it, that once he came back to Israel, there was a plan. The Jews already left Egypt, and the Egyptians wanted to expand their highway. And part of what was stopping them from expanding the highway was a Jewish cemetery. And the Jews who had left Egypt to live in Israel, it was their parents' graves, their uncles' graves, their siblings' graves. They didn't know what to do. And they were very worried that they're going to destroy the whole cemetery. Look, there are no Jews. Why should we care to take care of the cemetery? And Rabbi Ovadia Yosef called for a meeting with Mubarak. He flew to Egypt. And he sat with Mubarak, who was already the president at the time. He sat with him in the presidential palace or the estate or wherever he sat in. He came with a few Israeli Knesset members. And Mubarak said, what you're asking for me is very difficult. He said, okay, so you could do difficult things. He said, but you're asking me to do something that's, what am I going to tell the Egyptians? He said, you'll find something to tell them. And he helped him reroute the freeway so it wouldn't have to go over the cemetery. And Mubarak listened to him. and changed the route of the freeway to make sure that it wouldn't go over any Jewish graves. The world is not so black and white. I have to tell you, I don't speak politics. This is not a political statement. This is a looking back at history statement. We had people like Rabbi Yosef once upon a time. People who lived in the land of Israel, and they didn't feel this guilty conscience of maybe I'm a colonial settler. Maybe I'm occupying somebody else's land. Our current Israeli government is not confident that they're not occupying someone else's land. They're not
Right.
confident. And Rabbi Yosef was the kind of person, he wasn't the prime minister. You could have found a prime minister like him, who spoke Arabic, who understood the language, who understood the culture, who knew what kind of Cuban cigars you had to get Mubarak when you visited him, not which news channel you come to shake his hand with. Who would know how to speak to him to the right spot, to the right place. Everybody probably spoke to him something along the lines of, you don't want to mess with souls, souls are very important. You know, the Arabs believe in certain things that Jews believe in, and perhaps a little more superstitious than we do. If we would have had such a leader who said, listen, we're not going to give you our land. Rabbi was very, very adamant. But we're going to have to learn how to work here together. I'm not afraid to call you out when you're wrong. You're a terrorist. But we have to learn how to talk to each other. What you're saying in Israel could look a little different. It wouldn't be the best situation. I don't think we'd still be living like sheep's lying with a wolf. I don't think that's how it would look. But it would be somebody who knows how to speak the language, not just Arabic, not just the language, but the culture, the style, the understanding. There were such leaders, and it's a tragedy that we have chosen to go down a European colonialist settler approach to living in the land of Israel, and not we're an indigenous Middle Eastern people, let's speak like Middle Easterners and deal with things like Middle Easterners, and perhaps the world could look a little bit different. That's just my personal agenda. But it has nothing to do with something you have to believe in, and when it comes down to the halakha...
Didn't Rabbi Riskin try to do that with his community? Arabic Ulpan, trying to live with the villagers.
I would argue just that, again, it comes from a place of American naivete and not from a place of
That's a different
understanding of the Middle
European
Eastern complex.
Because they had some very bad experiences, of course.
Yeah, of course, and I have to say for his credit that he's tried very hard to make some peace with people around him that I don't know want his peace. But he tries, he does try. And the bottom line here is when we come into a place, it's a domain, it's a territory of somebody else. We're entering a cemetery, it's someone else's spiritual domain. Just like you go to somebody's house and they ask you, do you mind taking your jacket off and hanging it up in this spot and don't put it on the chair? Something to that effect. When you enter a cemetery, we want to have the same sensitivities we have to other people. We very much believe that those who pass are with us and that they guide us and they can pray for us. And there's a big argument in the Talmud about whether spirits are still here and if they can communicate with us. I'm not here to break my head in deciding this, but I can tell you that tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, was the yahrzeit of couple Ben Tevel, and we're asking Hashem to have make his neshama have an aliyah in Gan Eden, B'ezrat Hashem. And there's a traditional prayer that we say, it's a short one, and there's an older, longer version that the Arizal got rid of, so many Sephardic communities say it, but we don't. And the nusach is as follows, just ask that you say Amen at the end, B'ezrat Hashem. Ha-merachem al kol berutav, hu yachus v'yachmol v'yachem al nefesh ruach unshama, shel ha-niftar b'shem tov min ha'olam, couple Ben Tevel. רוח אדוני תנחנו בגן עדן, הוא וכל בני ישראל שוכבים עמו, בכלל הרחמים והסליחות, וכן יהי רצון, ונאמר אמן.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Jazakallah.